Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Hugh McKay, and I'm president of the board of directors of the City Club. For those of you who might like to become Secretary of Energy and are wondering what sort of credentials might make you worthy, it's not a problem. Just refer to today's speaker, Dr. Stephen Chu. First, just get your math and physics degree from the University of Rochester, your PhD in physics from the University of California, Berkeley. Then become a member of the National Academy of Sciences, the American Philosophical Society, the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, the Academy Sinica, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, and the Korean Academy of Science and Engineering. And then serve on the boards of the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, the University of Rochester, NVIDIA, and the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology, as well as the Executive Committee of the National Academy of Sciences Board on Physics and Astronomy, the National Institutes of Health Advisory Committee to the Director, and the National Nuclear Security Administration Advisory Committee to the Director. You'll then want to receive your honorary degrees from 15 universities, hold 10 patents, and then you'll publish 250 scientific and technical papers. And then, of course, you're going to want to receive your Nobel Prize in Physics. So there's really nothing to it. As United States Secretary of Energy, Dr. Stephen Chu is charged with helping implement President Obama's agenda to invest in clean energy, reduce our dependence on foreign oil, address the global climate crisis, and create jobs. Prior to his appointment as Secretary of Energy, Dr. Chu was the director of the Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, where he led the lab in pursuit of alternative and renewable energy sources. He also taught at the University of California as a professor of physics and professor of molecular and cell biology. Previously, he held positions at Stanford University and AT&T Bell Laboratories. Secretary Chu's achievements in atomic physics, quantum electronics, polymers, and biophysics are truly remarkable and comprehensible to many of you. While at Stanford, Dr. Chu helped start BioX, a renowned multidisciplinary initiative that brings together the physical and biological sciences with engineering and medicine. His professional work on energy opportunities and challenges has been prodigious. He's also recently focused on hydraulic fracturing, an issue of major regional importance. In announcing Dr. Chu's selection as Secretary of Energy, President Obama said, quote, "The future of our economy and the national security is inextricably linked to one challenge, energy. Stephen has blazed new trails as a scientist, teacher, and administrator, and has recently led the Berkeley National Laboratory in pursuit of new alternative and renewable energies. He is uniquely suited to be our next Secretary of Energy as we make this pursuit a guiding purpose of the Department of Energy as well as a national mission." Please welcome to the City Club of Cleveland, Dr. Stephen Chu.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Despite all of that, my mother remains unimpressed. In any case, it's great to be here at the City Club, and it's great to be here, especially in helping you celebrate your 100th anniversary. And it's also fitting that I come here to talk about energy. Cleveland was the home of our country's first wind turbine to generate electricity, and it is at the forefront of a lot of what's happening in the clean energy economy. So today I want to talk about a global race that you may not appreciate, but we are in. And but I want to start this by first reminding you of a little history, and it has to do with the history of America's role in aviation. And there are a lot of nuances to the story, but you'll have to bear with me. So I'm not going to begin with the Wright brothers, but a little bit before the Wright brothers. So the story begins with Samuel Langley. He was a very distinguished scientist. He was at that time a secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. And he was a pioneer in taking gliders and putting power on them, and so you have now powered gliders. And people felt that he would be the person to succeed in making the first human-powered aircraft. And because of that, he received a grant of $50,000 from the War Department at the time. And $50,000 in the turn of the 19th to 20th century was a lot of money. And he was going to launch his planes from a barge in the Potomac in Washington, where he worked. And after the second launch, both of them, they crashed sadly into the Potomac. Luckily, the pilot survived because it was a splashdown. But after the second attempt, he said, I'm giving up, because he couldn't take he was in his 60s and said, I'm not built for this. He was also an astronomer and a mathematician. Now, that was in December 1903. And only 9 days later, after the second crash, the Wright brothers succeeded at Kitty Hawk, December 17, 1903. And just imagine these two young men working in a bicycle shop, entrepreneurs, come out of left field, and they blow away the entire competition of the world and made the first powered aircraft. And it's really an example of the great entrepreneurial spirit. And as you can imagine, when they did all these things, that there were people in Congress who were outraged about funding the Langley project when the Wright brothers did it all on their own. And so you can imagine the criticisms. American ingenuity doesn't need taxpayer money. Government can't pick winners. Just get out of the way and let private enterprise. You've probably heard about some of these things recently. So the reason I'm telling you this story is not to support that criticism, but to let you know that there was more to it, the story. So the Wright brothers succeeded. It was true, without government support. They did come out of nowhere. They actually used Langley's work, and Langley actually, in part of his charge, was he was actually going to bring the literature of the world to anyone who wanted it. And so he actually, for example, made sure that people, including the Wright brothers, they wrote to Langley, tell us what you know, and he told them what they knew, and he also told them what some of the pioneers in Europe were doing. But the very important thing is the Wright brothers were still making bicycles. That was their living. And the U.S. government allowed them to very quickly move from making and repairing bicycles to making airplanes. Why? Because they were the first, probably the only, but certainly the major customer of the Wright brothers' planes. There was another fellow by the name of Curtiss, a competitor, and the U.S. military were buying both airplanes from both of these companies. But I want to continue with the story. So the U.S. government was the first customer and kept these businesses going. And then the Wright brothers go to Europe, I think it was 1906, triumphant show that, yes, indeed, they could not only build an airplane, they could actually turn, they could do figure eights, they could stay aloft for an hour by that time. Clearly the leaders in aviation. But by the beginning of World War I, 1914, the U.S. lost the lead. And by the time we entered the war in 1917, we had so much lost the lead that our allies convinced the United States, don't bother building the planes you've been supporting. They're inferior. Build ours. And the United States government agreed. So in U.S. factories, we built Allied, notably English and French, English planes especially. Okay? But that was 1917. So in less than a decade, we lost the lead. Now, after, I should also say that why did we lose the lead so quickly? Especially since the military was buying airplanes. But if you look back in history, between 1908 and 1913, the U.S. ranked 14th in government investments in aviation. Okay, now you can think, 14th, You expect Germany or France or England or Russia, they were arming for a war. But we were behind Japan and Chile and Brazil. Bulgaria, Greece. So when we ranked 14th in government support of aviation, it began to show, and it showed in less than a decade. Now, after World War I, 1918, what to do? We were building 17,000 planes that previous year in the United States. We had great industrial output. The United States said, well, there's a debate. Well, we lost the lead to Europe. We invented the airplane. That's good, but are we going to buy our airplanes from Europe? And it was a very determined leadership that said no. This was an economic opportunity, and it was certainly a national security imperative. And so there was legislation passed, and there were two things. The government formed agencies to support research and development, and even at least as important, they allowed private companies to carry the precious U.S. mail as airmail. Because at that time, in the early 20s, people weren't about to get on an airplane and travel. They still crashed, more than you'd like. Okay, so now, in 1930, the then Postmaster General Walter Brown spoke about this government strategy. He said, when, by reason of public patronage, it shall take place among other successful American industries, independent of government subsidy, an enduring contribution that will have made progress, prosperity, and security for our country. So let me recap. The government was becoming an early customer, buy the things, keep the industry going until there was bigger commercial interests and it could be self-sustaining, but the goal was to become self-sufficient without subsidy, clearly. Okay? So even though the United States fell behind in aviation, we recognized the economic opportunity and we wanted to recapture the lead. And so, and this government support, so even though we didn't initially support the Wright brothers' research, as soon as they succeeded, we began to support them and allowed them to concentrate in designing and building airplanes and not bicycles. Now, this plays over and over again in all sorts of things that we may now take for granted in leadership. This is true of airplanes, automobiles, semiconductors, computers. Semiconductors and computers, again, the government was the first customer for a decade and a half before it became a commercial success. So the question brings me to clean energy and what are the opportunities and what is happening. So last year, worldwide, the investments in clean energy reached a record $260 billion. And in the coming decades, we think that the clean energy market is going to grow still further. It's projected by 2020, perhaps $400 to $500 billion by Bloomberg New Energy Finance. And this is beginning to be serious money. This is going to overtake beer and potato chips. And it's something that we may be able to compete in. And so let's talk about the competition. There are countries, notably China, Korea, Germany, and others, who see an opportunity here. Those countries also see opportunities in all high-tech manufacturing. And they want to be leaders in high-technology manufacturing, high technology, like airplanes and pharmaceuticals and electronics and automobiles. And so they see this growing market, and they want to invest in it. Let me give you an example of these investments. Oh, by the way, one of the reasons why they see this opportunity is, and it goes back to the comment that the Postmaster General said, we want an industry that will thrive without subsidy. And here, the question is, will renewable energies thrive without subsidy? If you asked me 10 or 20 years ago, I would have said, I'm not sure if this will happen, but now, as I watch the price of wind technology come down and down through these so-called learning curves, and I watched the price of solar come down extremely rapidly, 70% in the last 2.5 years. It came down 70%. It's 30% of what it used to cost 2.5 years ago. It's going to come down by another twofold within the next decade, maybe 3- or 4-fold. So we think it's no longer a question for solar and wind both, if they will be competitive with any form of new energy, but when they will be competitive, whether it's this decade or the next decade. And so when they do become competitive with any form of new energy, we have to ask ourselves, are we going to be importing or exporting? Now, what are other countries doing? 10 other countries have adopted renewable electricity standards. More than 50 countries have offered some type of public financing for clean energy projects. Germany and Canada operate government-backed clean energy lending programs. There's a China Development Bank that's offered more than $47 billion in credit lines to the country's wind and solar manufacturers, $47 billion, to back them for additional credit. And China is expected this year to be the biggest deployer in their country of renewable energies, passing the U.S. So they've set ambitious targets to install this wind and solar capacity. And the question is, and they have an eye not only to their domestic market, they want to diversify their energy from largely electricity generation from coal, but they also see, as is Korea, as is Germany, as in many other countries, an international market. Roughly half of the solar cell and module production is now in China. We still ship to China for producing the solar things a lot of things like materials, like polysilicon. Surprisingly, we're the greatest exporter of polysilicon to countries like China, which take this material, turn it into solar modules in high technology roboticized factories, and then ship it around the world. Okay, it's not cheap labor. It's actually, they're adding the highest value technology now in China. And so, to quote a famous author, that used to be us, the U.S. And so the question is, are we going to still be in the game? And I think we have to be, I think we can be, and we should be. I think Ohio appreciates this. A recent Brookings Institution report ranked Ohio as the 6th largest state in terms of jobs in the so-called clean economy. And Ohio has an alternative energy portfolio standard that's helping us grow its clean industries. The Ohio solar industry includes almost 100 companies that are creating jobs, producing, distributing, and installing solar systems. But I emphasize it's not only, especially in manufacturing, it's not only the jobs, direct jobs in manufacturing, there's supply chains, and there's all the supporting service industries that go even behind those. So manufacturing in general is a huge importance to the United States. And when some economists and others say, well, we don't really have to worry about manufacturing jobs, we can go to the service sector, I try to remind them that in the end, we actually will be importing and exporting certain goods. It won't all be internal, I don't sell you pizza, you sell me blue jeans, because you're going to be buying automobiles, you're going to be buying electronics, you're going to be buying all sorts of things. And are you going to be buying or are you going to be selling as a country? So now let's talk about Ohio and the region. The Great Lakes have a lot of potential offshore wind, 742 gigawatts of offshore wind potential. But it's a matter of getting the offshore wind to be reliable, productive, again, with an eye to being self-sufficient in the near term. Also, automobile manufacturing, many things where Ohio has a large stand, a large presence, and again, very important to the future prosperity of the United States. So now, our President Obama, has been working since the beginning to strengthen the U.S. competitiveness in not only clean energy, but in manufacturing in general. And through the Recovery Act, we've invested $90 billion in clean energy, including nearly $800 million in Ohio. This is to promote energy efficiency, modernize our grid, deploy renewable energy, and support advanced vehicle manufacturing. We're on track to double our renewable energy generation in the President's first term. We've have, tax credits that have really helped deploy energy projects. And in Ohio, the program, this is a grant in lieu of a tax credit. A tax credit you get if you produce something and then over a period of time, you can claim it as a tax credit. And in a program called the glorious name of 1603, Congress thinks of very romantic names. What has happened is if you install this and when you flip on the switch for, let's say, a wind farm or a solar farm, you get 30% of your investment back immediately. And what that has done is many investors turned right around, took the money, and reinvested in the next one, which was very, very good. In terms of helping families save money by saving energy, our weatherization program across the United States is now slightly ahead of schedule, and we've weatherized more than 750,000 homes, low-income homes, over the past 3 years. And Ohio has weatherized more than 40,000 homes. And we now look towards the future of trying to generate business models where if it really is true, and I believe it is, that by making the right investments you can save money by saving energy, then you should be able to construct self-sustaining business models without large government subsidy or any government subsidy. And so we are now piloting these things, and we're asking for people to come forward with programs that can actually show that this is indeed true, and so that we're into this next stage. We are investing in the next generation of fuel-efficient, but not only fuel-efficient, but automobiles that also would be fun to drive and the American public wants. Last week, I think it was last week, I came back from the Detroit Auto Show. It was a very enlightening experience because I saw Ford and Chrysler and GM now coming up with cars that were getting great reviews in the magazines that, I don't know, I would honestly say that maybe 10 years ago I wouldn't consider buying an American car, but now I'm thinking, yes, I would not only consider it, it would be something very exciting. These were fantastic cars, and there's a growing realization that we should be making cars here in America and exporting them. And that to do that, I mean, this is what Germany and Japan and now Korea have done. Their own market was not big enough. So they went in with the idea that we want to make cars that can be exported all around the world. But our own market, you know, we're going to 12 million cars a year. The peak was 16 or 17 million cars a year. But China will be buying 20 million cars a year within a few years, followed by India. And right now there's about a billion cars on the road worldwide. And we think by 2050 there may be 2 billion. So, again, can we build cars in America to export worldwide? I think we can, and we should, and that should be our goal. So all of these things are very important. And quite frankly, energy efficiency would be very important because the world market is also demanding that the cars not only perform well, but are also energy efficient. Now, we've also set an ambitious but we think achievable goal of reducing oil imports by a third by 2025. This one I think we're going to make also for a variety of reasons, both consuming less oil because our automobiles, for example, are becoming much more efficient, but also because of technology in fossil fuel and increased production. For the first time in the United States history over the last year or two, we're actually increasing production of oil in the U.S. Anyway, we still want to go on a path of furthering decreasing our dependence on foreign oil. What else can I say? We have just recently reclaimed leadership in investments in clean energy, but this is going to be short-lived because this was only last year, but it was through the Recovery Act policies that enabled us to do this. And in last September, the loan program was closed. The so-called 1705 program was closed. The tax credit program 1603 ended a few weeks ago. and the production tax credit is scheduled to expire in 2012. This is for wind and solar, and if we let that go, again, we would see less investments in the U.S. It's going to be tough going forward. We have tight fiscal budgets. We have a large deficit. We have to do what we can to reduce those deficits and do it aggressively. But again, it can't be an even peanut butter spread. I think, again, we have to look at what will lay the groundwork for our future prosperity. So, going back to this clean energy race, I think other countries have recognized its importance, are investing. A little anecdote. I was talking to my counterpart in Great Britain, the energy minister. They were going to be starting a loan program to invest clean energy is in our technology sweet spot. We are continuing to be the most innovative country in the world. We have the greatest research and development centers in the world, the greatest research universities in the world. I'm here in Cleveland, and I know Case Western reasonably well. I was roped into being on the visiting committee to the physics department there. But I know not only physics, I know their engineering, I know their sciences in general. Excellent school, but those are examples of the intellectual power in the United States. And the American research universities still are the most innovative in the world, bar none. But we can't take it for granted. But we have that behind us. We have an entrepreneurial system and a venture capital system behind us, which is better, bar none, that doesn't really need federal help. After the entrepreneurial and first investments, there may be some issues, but certainly we have all those things. So we have the technological expertise and inventiveness and the core structures. There's going to be a hundreds of billion-dollar-a-year business growing before our eyes, and everything in that business is high technology. And so we have to remember that. So as we do this, we also have to remember that the government doesn't have to pay for everything. The government can be a first early adopter, but through subtle policies, you can guide what have to be, in the end, mostly or virtually all private investment in order to do this. But government policies are still very important in order to guide those investments. And so this is what it's going to be about going forward. Both to take full advantage of our innovation, to know there will be a market, to know that if you succeed, you can sell these things, just as when the early computer and semiconductor manufacturers knew if they succeeded. And I remember the early days when I was a kid, those first transistor radios were terrible. And some audio aficionados probably resisted for decades beyond that when they were better, but never mind that. The U.S. government, again, was the first early adopter, that because they could recognize the future of what was going on and how that could go into such a successful industry. So, again, we have some of the world's largest capital markets, and we need to do what we can to leverage that strength to unlock those investments. And finally, again, we need domestic demand, and we're thinking very hard in the United States, and how do you produce that demand, that market draw, to let people know if they're successful, they can sell that product. And again, with the eye that I was asked, how long do you think we need to subsidize renewable energy? And in one of the congressional hearings, and I was thinking to myself, and I said, well, I think oil and gas is subsidized for about 100 years. Absolutely, before 100 years is up, we should stop it. Now, to be fair, these subsidies started in the 70s. Okay, the clock has been running since the mid-70s. But, I think it's a decade or two. The technology is coming around so fast now that I see the time where we won't have to stop it. Finally, we're also having dialogue with members of Congress. You have a tireless advocate in Senator Sherrod Brown, and how we can strengthen American competitiveness in clean energy. These are tough fiscal times, and we hope that Congress will see that these are investments that are very important for our future. Now, oh, good. I'm almost on time. I think in this serious discussion, we have to get behind the sound bites. This is not political in my mind. It's absolutely not political. This is something that really, what are you going to do to ensure that we have all this capability and ingenuity and ability to succeed, and we have a very competitive market. And leads come and go. I mean, the American airplane industry came, it went, it came again, and went again. Boeing is now in a very, very tight race with Airbus. But we're still players, and Boeing is still a fantastic company. And whenever we lose a lead, this is not in our American spirit to say, oh, lead gone, let's go to something else. Automobile manufacturing, oops, lead gone, forget about automobile manufacturing. No, get the lead back. And so this is part of our American spirit. This is part of what's going on. And in the clean energy race, we invented the silicon photocell. We generated the first wind turbines. We invented many things. The lithium-ion battery was invented by an American. The lead went to Asia, notably to Korea. But actually, the improvements in advanced batteries, many of them, most of them that I see, are actually here in the United States. So, but it's not only sufficient that we make these improvements, make these inventions. We have to invent it here, we have to make it here, and then we have to sell worldwide. And so this is what this is about. This is about generating prosperity and jobs, not 50 years from today, but today and tomorrow and the next coming years. And we have to not lose sight of that fact. Thank you.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we're listening to a special forum featuring U.S. Secretary of Energy, Dr. Stephen Chu. We will return to Secretary Chu in a moment for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We encourage you to formulate your questions now. Please remember to try to keep them brief. We remind you all that you're welcome to attend City Club events. We would ask that any of you who are not members, please join the City Club. We could use your support. It's easy to do online or here. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN, 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations across the country. Our television broadcast partner is WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. There are several great programs scheduled for the remainder of January. Please visit our website, www.cityclub.org, to see the great programs that are coming up. For example, on Friday, January 20th, the City Club welcomes Jay Timmons, President and CEO of the National Association of Manufacturers, followed on January 24th by Dr. Nicole Lurie, Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. On January 27th, Karen G. Mills, Administrator for the Small Business Administration, will discuss entrepreneurship, small business, and creating jobs we need now. If you wish to make reservations for any of the upcoming programs or to order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or 216-621-0082. We're pleased today to welcome guests at tables hosted by Case Western Reserve University, Center for International Affairs, Cuyahoga Community College, Great Lakes Energy Institute at Case, Medical Center Company, Medical Mutual, Motivations, NASA Glenn Research, Nortec, the Operation and Supply Chain Management Department at Case, and Richard Bowen and Associates. Thank you all for joining us today. Now we'd like to return to Secretary Chu for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from any of you. Holding the microphones today, we have Carrie Miller and Special Initiatives Coordinator Phil Williams. First question, please.
Yes, Secretary. What do you think it would take to pass a national energy plan?
I think it would take the Republicans and the Democrats to recognize that this is the future of the United States. And this is going to be a large part of our future prosperity. This is not about making sacrifices. This is actually about recognizing that we can compete and have the opportunity to compete. And so it's sometimes cast as too expensive. And I reiterate that with subtle government policies that encourage private sector investments, we can get there. That is the heart of our system. And so, you know, the days of Recovery Act, because of our deficits, are over. And the President recognizes this, everybody recognizes this. But we can't continue. And again, we have all the ingredients here in America.
Mr. Secretary, the current energy industry is really focused on large utility, large producers, people that can service many, many customers. But a lot of us think that smaller production by individual families or by buildings or groups would be as efficient or more efficient if well designed. What is in the current activity of the federal government to encourage that kind of small production at a home or business scale?
Well, there's a couple of things. First, in many states, no doubt, and probably also in not only Ohio but in Cleveland and California, my state, there are certain things. If you, for example, are a homeowner or a business and want to put solar panels on your roof, you can generate enough electricity to net out your bill, make it zero. In actual fact, that's fine, except it doesn't actually make the utility company or the person who has to integrate this thing a piece of the action, right? They still have to be the backup, the reliability, the transmission, all these other things. So one of the biggest things to encourage this, as, for example, solar power or wind get less and less expensive, that you need to make the traditional power providers part of the solution. They have to share in the profit. And if they do that, then right now, renewable energy in the United States is about 6%. Most of it's wind, but now we're seeing a big investment in solar. Solar has, in many respects, has an opportunity because it scales. You can put it on a roof, you can put it on a warehouse, you can put it on a field. And so what we're doing is trying to start a dialogue, anticipating that the price of renewable energy will become competitive, whether it's 10 years from today or 15 years or 20 years, it's somewhere around that time scale, so that we can integrate renewable energy with fossil energy, especially gas, because gas turbines today can be, the most modern gas turbines can ramp up very rapidly. In 20 minutes now, the ones that GE is now selling can go from, you know, heard of cars going 0 to 60. This goes 0 to 500 megawatts from an almost cold start in 10 minutes. 10 minutes is all the lead time you need to, you know, with wind anemometers to say, oh, the wind's dying down, time to ramp up. Right now, we keep hot spinning reserves going. That means the boiler's hot. That means you're still burning fossil fuel just in case the clouds roll by or the sun or the wind stops blowing. We now have the technology to integrate fossil fuel with renewables, but you need a grid system and you need a way to dispatch automatically. So again, we're now recognizing, as the Department of Energy, we got to start these dialogues with all the energy providers, the utility companies, the merchant providers, everyone, with transmission distribution people, to allow the system to accommodate when it becomes as cheap as new gas or new coal. New coal is not very cheap anymore. New gas is the least expensive, but the target is to be competitive with new gas. And so that's something that's very important. So I see a nano-micro generation of energy, but it still has to be coupled to give you the security until the price of batteries and energy storage comes down, which is also a good news story. Now, the price of automobile batteries has come down twofold in the last 3 years, and it's going to come down probably another twofold in the last 3 or 4 next years. If it comes down 3 or 4-fold, then it gets very exciting. Then you can envision without subsidy a $20,000 car that can go the first 50 miles without using gasoline. And I'm looking forward to the thrill of driving by gasoline stations.
Good afternoon, Dr. Chu. Welcome to Cleveland. You speak a lot about solar and wind technology as part of the government's current advanced energy strategy. How does fuel cell technology fit into that?
Yep.
Ohio is very much a fuel cell state.
I think there are two parts of fuel cell technology that have real promise. The first is the stationary fuel cell technology. This is something that just sits there. Doesn't have to have the stringent operating conditions. They can work at high temperatures. And there are a number of companies in the United States and abroad, very competitive business, because the competition would be a diesel generator. You take natural gas, you can do a little reforming to make it hydrogen, or you can just have a natural gas fuel cell. Since natural gas is going to be the forecast because of our shale gas resources, the feeling is it's going to be abundant for at least several decades, a half a century. And right now, if those of you know, the natural gas prices are amazingly low. They're $2.50, less than $3 per million BTU. And so by generating electricity at 50 to 60% efficiency with natural gas, it certainly looks much more enticing than a diesel fuel generator. And it's an emergency backup system. The other one would be in transportation. There was probably going to be a hydrogen fuel cell. Hydrogen burns very cleanly, but it's going to come from natural gas. Right now, the way we make hydrogen is reform natural gas. So you're not that much, you're about braking, maybe teensy better braking, but fuel cells are more efficient than a internal combustion engine. But the carbon you're emitting, including the reforming, is an issue. So that doesn't really help the carbon emission problem unless you reform natural gas, an essential thing, ship the hydrogen around, and sequester it. Now, the fact that natural gas has become much more abundant, very clearly more abundant, especially in the last 5 years, 10 years, means that you have to rethink, there used to be a time in the United States where we were passing laws that forbid the use of natural gas to generate electricity. Okay? So it's not that long ago, so we have to remember this. So we need to rethink this. The technology in fuel cells is developing very rapidly, both the hydrogen and the stationary and the mobile ones. The advantage of a fuel cell in an automobile is that it's ultimately going to be a chemical fuel, and the time to refuel a chemical-based car, whether it's hydrogen or natural gas or gasoline or diesel, is much faster than the time it takes to refuel an electric vehicle. Okay, and at least in the near term, the next decade, we don't see a way around that. I don't know if you appreciate, when you go up to a gasoline station and stick the thing into your car, the power you're putting in the car in just raw energy is about 10 megawatts flowing into your car. Okay? I don't know if any of you know how big a 10 megawatt connector is, but it's big. And the most powerful charger being sold today is a mother charger developed by Nissan. It's 60 kilowatts. 60 kilowatts. So you're slipping a couple of decimal places, almost 2. Okay? So hydrogen is attractive for that reason, but there are other issues: the infrastructure, the cost. Is coming down, but there are many things. But this is something we support in research and development. And again, the stationary fuel cells are becoming commercially viable. This is good news. Not yet in the car. And the car manufacturers realize this, but you can't place all your bets on one technology or another. You've got to spread them out. And that's, again, we totally agree with that.
Secretary Chu, Tom Bullock, Pew Charitable Trust. 2 questions. One is on PACE financing. Is there a chance the federal government can unclog the policy difference at the federal level? In Greater Cleveland, we've established a PACE district for commercial properties. We'd like to expand that to residential because we think it could do good for a lot of the old construction homes here, especially on energy efficiency and solar energy. The other question I'd like to ask, do you agree with the statement that government policy drives the investments that you've described? My organization, Pew Charitable Trust, has done studies in support of some of the things you talked to us in your speech about, rating the global market for clean energy at $3.2 trillion globally over the next 10 years, and we annually rank nations about in terms of who's leading the clean energy economy race. 2 years ago, it was the United States, and actually in 2009, it was the United States. In 2010, we dropped a third behind China and Germany. This spring, we'll update that and see how the United States did in 2011. Thank you.
First, I follow your reports, and every time they're updated, I read them, and it's certainly true. When the Recovery Act investments roll off for 2012, we will, China and Germany, as you say, were ahead of us. We will go somewhere maybe behind Italy in 2012 is my guess, if nothing else is done. So, as I said, and this is why I was telling the story of the airplane industry, countries do, it's not a level playing field. If the United States says, okay, we're going to let the private sector deal with this, that's all fine and good if every country did that. But as your reports emphasize, as others emphasize, it isn't a level playing field, and other countries are not sitting back and saying, let the private sector figure it out. In terms of the PACE, I don't know how many people in the room understand this, but it's something pioneered, I think in California and maybe a few other places, where it's trying to overcome the initial investment. If you want to make investments in your home, energy efficiency, better insulation, seal cracks and leaks, those are the best investments you can make, and then go to upgrading to much more efficient heating and cooling units. Many times, many Americans, this could cost $10,000, it could cost $20,000, it could cost $5,000. And many Americans' families don't have that money. And so what you need to make available is some form of moderate interest financing to allow that to occur. If you do that, if you have moderate interest financing, your monthly payments, you're not out of pocket, your monthly payments to your debt should be less than the money you save in energy. And so a few areas inside this novel program, the municipality, let's say the city of Berkeley, might give you the loan in the form of a higher tax assessment that would be paid back over 20 years or some amount of time. So if the owner sells the home, you know, the new owner has the benefit of more efficient, energy efficient and more thrifty home. So one of the issues in the government snarl is that the lenders, the mortgage, people who own the mortgages don't want anybody ahead of them. And they even don't want people to be pari passu with them, so that, you know, if the home costs $200,000 and you want $5,000 or $10,000 more, that proportionally you share the obligation. They want everyone else to be behind them. And so we are trying to work out whether it's possible to get through that bottleneck, but this is coming from that type of thinking. It is absolutely essential that we figure out ways of getting moderate interest financing. I think the best time to do your upgrade is when you're just bought a home. And there is a mechanism, but it's not taken advantage of. You can borrow additional extra money on a kind of an energy mortgage. And before you move in, you can do all the upgrades. So you get the benefit of having a more comfortable home and the full advantage of that. And so, you know, with Sean Donovan, we are looking at other programs that allow you to get over that capital hurdle, or to convince banks that it's okay. Now, there's another part. This is my personal view. When you're a lender, what do you ask for? Well, you ask for the price of the house. You ask for the property taxes. You ask for a lot of things. You ask for the person's income. And because it all goes through the affordability of the home to your prospective customer, if you're the lender, whether they can pay their mortgage. And there's some parts in the United States where the utility bills are quite high, sometimes approaching the tax bill. It would be prudent if the lender asked, what are the utility bills? Now, to be sure, it's highly variable. You could be a person who likes to be in a 78-degree home in the winter, or you can be a person who will be happy in a 68-degree home, or in my case, a 66-degree home. But that plus a kind of a structural rating, you know, the structural engineer gives you an energy rating, so at least the buyer knows and the banker knows. Now, just asking for that information by the lender, it's their choice, it shouldn't be a regulation, could actually spur a lot of people to make investments in their home. Right? You're asking for what were the last year's bills. So if I were going to think of selling my house, I would want to show a low number. So I would make investments because I would recoup those investments when I sold the home. So just very subtle policies, and this goes to your last part of the question, can government policies tilt things? Absolutely, in many, many ways. And you know, the tax credits and things, they drove a lot of the investments in renewables. They cost a lot of money. But there are also many other more subtle policies. Let me give you one more. You know, there's a thing called a mastered limited partnership. This is if, you know, in corporations, you have a corporation and body, and the corporation pays tax. And then they distribute who are the owners of the corporation? Well, they're shareholders. And if there's dividends, or if you sell your stock after a while, there's capital gains. And so the individual owners of the corporation also have to pay tax. In certain cases, if the corporation is not a big thing, it's not a GE or a GM, but it's a little thing where the investor money, either you as individuals or pension funds or you name it, go directly into this organization, which is a very, very small organization. So 90% of the money goes directly through and back. This is called a limited partnership. And when it's bigger and it allows more people to invest, it's called a massive limited partnership. The holding entity doesn't have to pay tax. The individuals still have to pay the tax. If we can allow massive limited partnerships in renewable energy investments or real estate investment trusts, a similar sort of mechanism, that will give you a tax credit for making investments in renewable energy or just to allow, not even a tax credit, but just to allow master limited partnerships in renewable energy or energy efficiency, that can go a long way. The industry that has master limited partnerships, industries, are the oil and gas and pipeline industry. Okay? So I would like to see the playing field leveled and allow master limited partnerships for a group that wants to invest in energy efficiency. They can raise capital, they can put it on different buildings. You can diversify the risk, so it's not just one building, it's hundreds of buildings. And if done right, it's a way of making available American capital to make money. But you're also, because that American capital, if properly invested, means your customer saves money. Okay? So this is, again, another example of a policy, subtle tweak that could do a lot. And both energy efficiency and clean energy would be great. You can get a master limited partnership for a pipeline, but you can't get a master limited partnership for a wind farm.
Mr. Secretary, last week you wrote a extraordinarily positive and actually a very refreshing letter to Congress expressing your support and the Department's support for the ACP project down in southern Ohio. And you talked about the great energy reasons, the economic reasons, security reasons. But being a skeptic of Congress, do you see any major obstacles for either the tail transfer or the RD&D program on a fairly quick basis?
Yeah, well, to bring everybody up to date, we are not asking for funding per se. We're asking for the ability to reprogram our own money within our budget, not additional money, to allow a research and development program to go forward in uranium separation. The reason, in the long term, we will need this because there are treaties which we not only sign but we strongly support, which says that any country can't buy someone else's uranium separation technology. That only the technology can only, if it's only used for, sorry, let me start again. For our nuclear security, we have an arsenal. The material for this arsenal has to come from indigenous supplies of uranium, and you also use uranium to make tritium, an isotope of hydrogen, for our nuclear arsenal. That material can only come from indigenous supplies in the country. This is a way of working against the proliferation of nuclear weapons because, uranium separation technology is quite expensive, it's sophisticated, and it's a way of controlling proliferation. So this is something we support in the United States very strongly. So our own arsenal needs uranium indigenous to our home country separation technology. Currently the most advanced successful technology is called centrifuge technology, and we are not leaders in that. Europe is now the leaders in that technology. And so USAC wants to develop this technology. Now in the short run, for the next 20 or 25 years, we're not up against the wall yet. But in the end, we will need our own indigenous technology. So just for our own internal security, as long as we have an arsenal, we need this. Whether the company is going to become financially successful in the competition of the world market is an open question. So we've asked Congress to give us transfer authority in an R&D program that would be 2 to 3 years, $300 million. We haven't been given permission yet, but if we don't get transfer authority, we can't go forward. We're trying to encourage Congress to do this. Because in the long term we do need it, and there's jobs. There's a lot of reasons why we want this technology. So it's a complex question, but since I only have 30 seconds, we'll leave it at that.
Very gracious. Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we've been listening to Dr. Stephen Chu, U.S. Secretary of Energy. Thank you, Dr. Chu. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.